yesterday, the meek and base, whose minds are fixed on pelf and place, to cringe beneath the rich man's frown and haul that sacred emblem down.
Raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its balls we'll live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here. With heads uncovered, swear we all to bear it onward till we fall. Come dungeons dark or gallows grim, this song shall be our parting hymn. Raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its balls we'll live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here.
Thank you very much, everyone, for giving up the Saturday morning to come to this wonderful place, a restored railway works, which is now put to good use for educational purposes. And I am one that greatly supports the railway industry and the manufacturing industry, and I want to see more trains made in Derby and all those skills that are here in Derby put to good use to develop our railway network. That's got to be something we're all agreed upon. I want to say a big thank you to all those that organised today's events, and I would like to say a particular thanks to all the volunteers that have put in so much work to put this event on at very short notice. They've worked incredibly hard to do it. And to all those that have spoken this morning about trade union rights, about mental health, about international issues, about development, and I want to say very personal, very warm thanks to Chris Williamson. And I can well understand how he was voted the MP by all the ordinary staff in Parliament, the one they would miss the most, because apart from being a great friend, a great thinker, he's also a proper gentleman in the real sense of the word. Chris, thank you for everything you did in Derby. And I can't wait for the day that you're back in Parliament representing the people of Derby, carrying on the great work you're doing, and ensuring that real hope and improvement comes to the ordinary people of this country, because in Chris you've got somebody absolutely brilliant and somebody very, very special who I'm very proud to call a very close friend of mine. Chris, thank you so much for what you said this morning. And anyone that ends a speech with poetry, Shelley, what a guy. He was, of course, related to my constituency, but I can always find a connection with every poet in my constituency, so I won't weary you with all those details. But I'll just say this about our campaign. It is a quite remarkable series of events that have happened. We lost the election in May. We were all very angry and very sad about that, and I think the reasons, when you think about it, are perhaps more obvious than they appeared at the time. We weren't offering anything that was clear enough, alternative enough, wasn't motivating or mobilising enough to people who had put their faith in Labour and the traditions of Labour for a very long time. Were we here today and Labour had managed to obtain a parliamentary majority, I suspect we would be supporting our council, City Council and our County Council in demanding sufficient funding to maintain services from a government. I don't want us ever to go in an election ever again when we're pledged to continue reducing the role of the state and reducing the funding for local government or any other public service. That is not what we're about. So when the election results came through, we had a discussion about having a policy seminar, policy development, and indeed I was one of a number of MPs who was actually opposed to holding an early leadership election. I wanted us to have a serious debate about the nature of the Labour Party, how we approach the issues that the Tory government has now thrown down on us, and what our policies ought to be. That wasn't to be. Instead, a leadership election was put forward, and I was asked by a number of colleagues if I'd put my name forward, and it was not obvious we were going to get the nominations. I did put my name forward, and we got 11 nominations, so that was a great start. We went up to 12 when I nominated myself, so there was some progress being made there, but we still had a long way to go. Two things happened. MPs thought that they should not be the gatekeepers of this election process and therefore prepared to nominate, even though they don't particularly agree with some of the analysis I put forward or some of their views. One of the Derby MPs, Margaret Beckett, was one of those that nominated through that process. There was also a very interesting movement by a large number of people on email, text, Facebook, Twitter, saying, give us a chance, give us a break, give us a voice, give us a choice. And it worked. And with oodles of time to spare, 1 minute 50 seconds, we got 36 nominations, so we were on the ballot paper. We started out, that was in June, with absolutely nothing. And since then, we've developed a campaign around a number of principles. The first one is, whatever personal abuse is thrown at anyone in our campaign, we don't reply, we don't respond, we don't abuse anybody else. We're not interested in that style of redundant politics, which is the politics of personal. And I have to say, for those people that think it particularly works, I can always tell when something particularly unpleasant has been written in any of our tabloid newspapers, because as I walk from my home in Finsbury Park to the station or wherever I'm going, I get an extra warm welcome from all the people on the street. out of support, solidarity and sympathy. They are perfectly wise to what is going on. The second point is that I think people have had enough of political decisions and policy decisions in our own party, as well as our society in general, being made remotely by self-appointed experts in some remote spot who hand that stuff down. We are practicing what we preach. We've put together a very large number of consultative proposals, policy statements. They're all there on our website. They're all there for agreement, disagreement, support, refinement, change, anything you want to say about them. They're all there as part of that process, so that everyone can genuinely have a say. Because in this wonderful hall alone, there are 1,000 people with 1,000 opinions, 1,000 bits of knowledge, 1,000 ideas, 1,000 ideas of how we can do things better and differently. All those ideas are relevant, all those ideas are valuable, all those ideas can and must be brought together. So when we say we're genuine about that consultation, we absolutely are. And I want, whatever the result on September the 12th, I want the Labour Party to totally change its policy-making process so that we develop our policies from the life experience, skills, genius and imagination of ordinary people, ordinary members who want to live in a better, decent, more civilised society, not having stuff handed down 3 weeks before an election in 2020. A lot of events all around the country as part of this campaign, and it's absolutely fascinating. I think my counting is roughly correct. As far as I can remember, this is the 83rd event we've done in this election campaign. That's why my voice is so bad. The only thing that's suffering is my voice in this campaign. Nothing else is suffering. And the attendance at them is remarkable and amazing. Look around this hall. Look around any other hall where we hold these events. It's ordinary people in modern Britain. It's black, it's white, it's multi-faith, it's different ages, it's all genders. It's incredible. It's people coming together, not on a culture of blaming somebody else for the problems, but a culture of together, optimistic, coherent, imaginative. That surely is what we want our society to be about. Do we have to say to the current generation of youngsters in school, going through college, going through university, sorry, the only thing you can look forward to is falling living standards, falling everything else in our society, and by the way, you better start putting everything away because we know public services left to look after you when you get sick, when you get old, when you have mental health difficulties or anything else. Sorry, we are one of the fourth, we are indeed probably the fourth or fifth richest country in the world. I think we should have a bit more confidence in how we run our society, a bit more confidence in the coherence of a society, and build that sense of community, not just at the local level, but in all our policy making and everything we do. It's not pie in the sky, it's sensible democratic politics, and that's what the Labour Party ought to be about and ought to be representing, and that's why we're in this contest for the leadership of the party. Very proud of the support we've received from a number of unions in this campaign. Mick spoke today, and his union has been absolutely fantastic, as have other unions that have supported us. I'm proud that my own union, Unison, nominated, that Unite have supported and nominated us, the Communication Workers Union, the Rail Maritime Transport Union, Transport Salaried Staffs Association, Prison Officers Association, Bakers Union, where you get your bread. Never forget the bakers. And the Prison Officers Association, Socialist Health Association, Socialist Education Association, and our friends in the Fire Brigades Union, and their wonderful slogan. I love it every time I see it. Their slogan on every demonstration is, "We save people, not banks." Thank you, FBU, for all that you do. Over 13,000 people have volunteered to help in our campaign, and I'll give you a flavour of the buzz around it. We had a big phone bank session last week in the Unite head office in London, and we had over 400 people came to do phoning around potential supporters or people who got an opportunity to vote in this election. Can you imagine 400 people all talking at the same time on a mobile phone in the same room or the same building? It was pretty chaotic, but God, it was fun. And that surely is something we can be proud about. But, and this is the but, we have to say, what are we going to do about the situation we're in? We've got a Tory government with a very, very clear political agenda. The political agenda is one of rolling back the state. The political agenda is one of cutting all public services. The political agenda is about reducing our National Health Service from being a service of universal provision to a service of last resort, and to destroy the whole principles behind the welfare state, and they're accompanied by constant media attacks and sniping from right-wing press on the whole principle of the kind of society that I suspect all of us in this room actually want to live in. We are not going to win back support for Labour in 2020 if all we can offer is a lightened version of the same thing that the Tories are doing. We were founded by people who were enslaved by people. We have to be able to mobilise that vision to achieve things. And people say, okay, what you're saying sounds like the 1980s. What the Tories are saying sounds to me like the 1930s, or in some cases, I wouldn't be so ungallant as to say so, but I will anyway. Some of them sound like the 1830s to me, what they're proposing. And so, you then have to look at the causes of the financial crisis of 2008. Was it caused by overpaid street sweepers in all our cities? Was it caused by the number of educational helpers in our schools? Was it caused by people working hard as engineers in factories and industries designing things? No, you know that. It was not. I know that it was not. It's utter nonsense. And it was not caused by the supposedly high level of public spending by the last government. What it was caused by was a deeply unequal society, an unregulated banking system, obscene levels of profits and personal bonuses taken by bankers, and they were playing ducks and drakes with money. And so the government at that time, Chris and I were both in Parliament at the time, were quite right to take the banks into public ownership. Absolutely the right thing to do. What was the mistake was that the shares were placed in a holding company, making it very easy and very convenient for any future Chancellor of the Exchequer to sell them off whenever they chose to do so. So the current Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Osborne, is selling off RBS shares at a loss. It's disgraceful. They're not his to sell, they're ours. And I think we should retain those shares in public ownership, as we should ensure that those banks actually operate in a socially responsible way. But after that, the agenda of austerity came saying that you must pay off the debt by date X, you must go into budget surplus by date Y, and until then, there's going to be austerity. Now, Osborne has changed the goalposts several times since 2010, so the date gets further and further away. He seems to have a memory lapse on every 5 years, actually. And that gap means that the price is actually paid by the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society, by those working in the public sector, by those forced onto zero-hours contracts, by those who are on very low wages, and those that are desperate for adult social care and all the other things that are needed all over the country. The cost of austerity is not being paid by those that caused the crisis. It's being paid by those who are the victims of the crisis and continues to be paid by them. So we put forward an economic strategy, and it is a consultation document, it's out there, which is about investing by creating a national investment bank, in part using the money that was put in to prop up the banks, and that national investment bank would be there to ensure proper investment in the infrastructure of this country, the railway infrastructure, for example. Why is the Midland Main Line still not electrified? Why have they cancelled Leeds to Manchester electrification? Why are they pausing so many other quite important schemes which will improve our rail network in this country? So a national investment bank, which is what we're suggesting, would be there to invest in infrastructure, invest in housing for those that need housing, rather than giving tax breaks for those that open up in the private rented sector and charge very high rents, which we end up subsidising through the housing benefit system. Put the money into building council housing for people to give them permanent, secure, safe accommodation. And beyond that is the question of how we invest in manufacturing industry in this country. Now, Derby is the centre of the most incredible industrial history and very high quality engineering that goes on at the moment. Bombardier, Rolls-Royce, many other companies exist in Derby. We have to retain and develop the enormous engineering heritage and skills that are in this country. We have to be prepared to invest in them with public investment if necessary, to ensure new products, to ensure new development, to ensure the skills of young people are actually properly used. We also have to develop in green energy and green energy jobs. All of this is actually a sensible and possible thing to do. This, I'm told, is unbelievably extreme and totally unacceptable. If I was saying this at any regional meeting, at a London Parliament or anything else in Germany, people would say, well, it seems perfectly sensible, perfectly normal thing to do, because they want to make sure they retain a manufacturing base. So do I, so do we, and I want to see it expanded in the future. And there is another issue, which I know some people have concerns about, and I'll address it because it should be addressed. I have a strong opposition to the existence of nuclear weapons in the world and to our possession of a private. Obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we're required under Article 6 to take steps towards disarmament. I want us to do that, and the next opportunity comes in 2016, when probably will be what's called the main gate decision taken in Parliament. And this is important to understand this. in ending, if that is achievable, I want it to be, Britain's involvement in nuclear weapons and become one of the non-nuclear weapon states in the world, and therefore, I think, a force for good in the world, rather than one of those 5 declared nuclear weapon states plus the 3 others, then there's going to have to be some quite significant changes. I recognise that those people that make the submarines, make the weaponry, make the guidance systems that go with it, are highly skilled workers doing a very difficult job with great brilliance. I do not see the cancellation of Trident, because that is what I want to see, as an opportunity to spend all that money on something else. I see that, and we put this out in a Defence Diversification Agency consultation document, I see that money being invested in high-quality engineering to protect all those jobs and ensure those skills are not lost. They're making civilian aircraft, they're making civilian vessels, they're making civilian electronic systems, so that we strengthen and extend our high-technology manufacturing base. We don't squander it. And I think there's an opportunity that can be achieved through defence diversification. It should not be seen as a threat, it should be seen as a real opportunity to strengthen the real industries of this country, and that is what we look forward to. I recognise none of this is simple and it's complicated, and I've been at many conferences on nuclear weapons, including people from the military, some of whom don't want nuclear weapons either, and I've spoken to numbers of union groups on this, and there's going to be a lot more discussion about it. But we've got to do this thing together and work it through together. Last couple of points I'll make, because if I don't finish fairly quickly, I'll get told off and we won't get to Sheffield for the next meeting enough. And if we don't get to Sheffield for the next meeting, we won't get to Manchester for the next meeting. If we don't get to Manchester, we won't get to London tomorrow morning. You can see the problem, can't you? Do you sympathise with the problem? Just say yes, okay? We are treated to a daily diet of abuse of those people that legitimately claim welfare benefits, social security I prefer to call it, because they're on low wage, or because they're unemployed, or because they have a disability condition, or because they have a mental health condition. All of those have been cut since 2010, and every time there's a cut in the welfare budget, there's another stream of criticism and programs like Benefit Street and all the rest. If I asked you if you all supported the National Health Service, you'd all say yes. If I asked you, do you want to live in a society where we actually measure our success by not having people sleeping on the streets, not having people begging, not having people destitute, and not having people who've been declared under some strange system as fit and available for work where they clearly are not, who end up committing suicide out of desperation. There is something deeply brutal about the way in which we treat some of the most vulnerable within our society. Can we not have the strength and the courage to be strong enough to say we want to live in a society where we do not pass by on the other side of people that are going through a desperate crisis in their lives? Because if you think about it, all of us could be there. All of us know people who've been through mental health crises. All of us are a road accident away from being in need of all kinds of health support and services. So as much as we value the National Health Service, and I want to end the internal market in the NHS, I want to end the privatisation in the NHS, I want to end the competition in the NHS, we have a wraparound NHS, but we also, I think, have to be to ensure that we have a social security system that does protect people against destitution. So we put forward the ideas of an expanding, growing economy. We put forward the ideas, as has been explained by other speakers, of not penalising young people for working hard, getting to college, getting to university, getting to a degree, and what's the prize they get? £50,000 worth of debt. Other countries manage to charge corporation tax at an appropriate level in order to pay for education for all. I want us to value education for the sake of education and for the benefit of all of us. Because if people are well qualified, well taught, well learned, then we all benefit from an educated society. Let's not penalise people for being educated. Let's welcome them, thank them, and live in a better society as a result of it. And while we're on with it, let's not destroy our secondary schools by atomising them into academies and free schools. Bring them back. Bring them back into the local authority orbit. So there's a whole lot of suggestions we've put out there. And I conclude with this thought. We live in a world of great danger at the present time. We live in a world of environmental degradation. We live in a world where there are more people displaced as a result of environmental crises and wars than there have ever been at any point in recorded history. Look around the world and you see the results of it. Desperate people fleeing from wars in Iraq, in Syria, in human rights abuses that have gone on in Eritrea and other countries, and you see those people desperately trying to survive in refugee camps in Libya, a country that has become deeply dysfunctional. I wasn't a supporter of the previous regime, but I think if you're going to bomb a country, you've got to think about what you're going to do after you've bombed the country, rather than just leaving chaos behind. There isn't a military solution to dealing with the issue of refugees. There is a human and humanitarian solution to dealing with it. That means playing our part. That means playing our part through the UN and others. It means playing our part in supporting refugees wherever they are in the world. Because you cannot say this isn't a human and humanitarian crisis. It's not simple. None of these things are simple. But there is no solution in using the language of abuse and insults at people who are trying to live and survive in refugee camps because they fled from a desperate situation. If any of us were faced with the kind of war positions that many of those refugees have been faced with, we would flee and we would go somewhere else and we would try and get safe for ourselves. So I think we have to play our part in supporting those people, play our part in trying to deal with the causes and the source of those that are desperate trying to flee. That means a global role. That means a global role not by following American foreign policy of intervention all around the world. It means a global role of promoting human rights, of promoting justice around the world, ensuring that international law is obeyed all around the world. That surely is a better way forward than going from one ghastly conflict to another, which then leads to one more ghastly conflict after another. There are many, many issues that we face as a society in Britain, as a society in the world. But what I think is so exciting about what's happening here and in the United States and in many parts of Europe is people coming together from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of walks of life, wanting to see and do things differently. Understanding the great contribution made by those who went before us, that got us the right to vote, got women the right to vote, got through the Human Rights Act, Disability Discrimination Act, got us a National Health Service, got us so much in our society. There are now 600,000 people, almost, able to vote in this particular election. This is the largest ever internal election of any political process in British history. It's the biggest ever membership of the Labour Party there has ever been. That is something surely to be very proud of, not frightened of. It's something that's very exciting. And that means we stay together. It means we make those demands together. It means we have a democratic process together. And it means we're then in a position to challenge the whole roll back the state, narrow agenda that the Tories have got, which will increase the gap between the richest and poorest, impoverish and devastate the lives of so many very poor people, and no doubt enrich the very richest. So I think we do things differently. We collect the uncollected tax, we go after the corporates that are evading tax, and we promote the coherent, developing, economically prosperous society that is actually possible. And that will give us a much better society in Britain. If Labour can set out that vision, now in opposition, now trying to protect local government and all the other services, we're then in a strong position to win in the future. You don't lose in 2020 by waiting, well, you would lose in 2020 if you waited to 2020 and sprung your ideas on the electorate. I think we start here now, opposing the welfare bill, opposing the trade union bill, the budget that goes with it, but promoting the kind of values, decency and good ideas that we've got. Together we are very strong. Individually we're very weak. There is no solution in staying at home, throwing things at the television and cursing what you read in the newspapers. There's quite a lot of solutions in doing things together, campaigning together and promoting things together. That's what's made this summer of 2015 so exciting politically in Britain, and what's made a number of people very nervous because they're not quite sure what our ideas are for the future. Well, I don't want to deliberately make people nervous, but I would like them to read what we're suggesting, understand this process that's going on, and not be frightened of democracy, but embrace it, because it's a democracy that protects our rights, it's a democracy that brings us the things that we need in our lives, it's democracy that gives us hope and optimism. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Corbyn for leader.